Good evening and thanks for joining us on the Week in Review. I'm Nick Blumberg. Illinois Democrats join a chorus of calls to remove President Donald Trump from office after he warns Iranians that a, quote, whole civilization will die tonight.
Let's be honest, there is something genuinely wrong with this man, and the 25th Amendment must be invoked before it's too late.
Trump's critics call for removing the president from office as the U.S. reaches a tenuous truce with Iran.
Let's be clear. When there is no accountability, there is no justice.
Activist Anjanette Young renews efforts to get state lawmakers to ban no-knock warrants, years after the wrongful raid on her home.
We must have a country that serves workers, not billionaires, and to demand ICE out of our communities.
Activists and labor groups plan an economic blackout and demonstrations on May Day, with the Chicago Teachers Union calling for classes to be canceled. Meantime, Mayor Brandon Johnson announces a replacement for the controversially fired deputy mayor for community safety. And big moves in Chicago basketball as the Bulls clean house in the front office and the Sky trade star Angel Reese. And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Justin Kaufman of Axios Chicago, Laura Washington of the Chicago Tribune and ABC 7 News, Hillary Gowans of the Chicago Tribune editorial board, and Michael Puente of WBEZ. Thank you all for being here. Let's get right to it. So Laura, the odds of the cabinet or Congress actually invoking the 25th Amendment, they seem relatively slim.
Zero.
All right, next question. But I mean, do you think, some of these growing calls, even from, Republicans, to remove Trump may at least tamp down some of the violent rhetoric?
Yeah, I think that people are going to start taking a closer look, and I think that when you're at a time of war like we are, he's had that kind of rhetoric throughout his whole political career, but now you're talking about life and death situations, and religious leaders have gotten involved as well, and I think perhaps this might be a time for his Republican colleagues, of people he listens to, whoever that is, to start to pull him back a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Hillary, as we mentioned, it's not just Dems calling for the president's removal. Are you at all surprised to see someone like Governor Pritzker ending up on the same side as folks like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Candace Owens or Alex Jones?
Well, I think you're going to see more of that because he's starting to go after his allies now. So, he's going after people like Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, and it's because they oppose the war, which most people do. And it's because we don't know what we're doing there. We don't know when we're getting out. We don't know what a win looks like. And this is not a good place to be. He campaigned on no more forever wars, and so people who thought that's what he was going to deliver are not happy, and he's not happy with them, so this is going to continue.
I mean, this has been his shtick since he was president in 2016. Remember, he went after Megyn Kelly in 2016. He's fought with his own people. He wants to be the pundit, the president, everything in between. He wants to be all of it. And you're seeing right now when he's fighting back against, like the big tweet he had, a long tweet he had at Truth Social against those so-called allies. I think it's more that he thinks that he's the one and they're going to fall in line. And for some reason, he is constantly trying to get our attention over and over.
Well, that's Trump, but those allies are not elected officials, they're allies. And the elected officials so far, I think, have been relatively quiet. They're still afraid of him. And the members of Congress, the members of the Senate who really do have the power to vote on that amendment are not going to move.
I got to admit, though, as I was looking at the clock on Tuesday, the deadline, I kept thinking, we're in Central Time, so like 8 o'clock Eastern Time. I was shaking. I was scared. I was like, what could happen?
Right.
We're at war. And now, there's people saying when you come out against, he might be anti-American. We're seeing even them pushing back against the Catholic Church.
Right.
But did we vote for this? Did we approve of this, of annihilating an entire what you said, human race, civilizations? Yeah, right. So I've never seen that. I've never heard that from a president, and it was quite jarring.
Well, the hopeful thing, though, is that Israel and the United States and Israel are not in the same place. And Israel does want to see this war continue, and they do want to see the slaughter, and the president, I think, does want to get out of this. So I think that does offer some hope that we can come up with a resolution that doesn't take us back into this violent period again.
Yeah, and you both mentioned religious leaders. Mike, you spoke with folks this week talking about not just war, but also some of the the pro-America language. What did you hear from folks about kind of how faith in this administration maybe are misaligned?
Well, you know, when you see some national stories, they may get one or two Christian nationalists to say, oh, what the president has said is acceptable. There's nothing wrong with it. But I could not find one person who agrees with what he put out there. And I did a cross-section, including interviewing, obviously, Cardinal Cupich, but also other evangelicals, other Christian denominations, Presbyterian. They were all saying what he said was wrong, especially his Easter Day message, where he used an expletive in a Truth Social posting. Nobody is in agreement with how he is pushing his message out.
And there's no doubt, but you know, people, let's say the MAGA movement, they hired this president because they wanted him to essentially do what he does, is negotiate the art of the deal. And so they will say, well, that got Iran's attention, there's a ceasefire. And that's the problem here, is that I think there's a disconnect between what's the right way for America to do business, especially internationally when we're talking about war or foreign diplomacy, to someone who's internal. They say, well, he got the job done.
Yeah, but they also hired him to not start wars. He said he was going to be war averse, and he criticized his predecessors for not being that way. So talk about a disconnect. You can't have it both ways.
Yeah, he spent so much time going after, you know, for example, Obama and Biden for, you know, long engage, and, you know, even going back to the Iraq War. And now we're seeing a very different message that perhaps now is the time to launch a foreign invasion. But a lot of folks who went for him didn't seem to agree with that.
Well, and 47% of Illinois voted for, well, not 40% of all Illinoisans, but voting Illinoisans went for Trump. And so you have to pull a lot of non-MAGA reasonable folks to get that number. And again, he said no wars, and he said sensible immigration reform. I mean, this is just like two biggies where regular people don't like how this is going.
But if you do see some of the way they're still framing it on the right, they'll say, well, President Trump, there was no other president before him who had the guts to do what he did to take it on Iran. Was it guts or just worrisome, as if you're going to go to war with Iran, this is what could happen? Now we're looking at a situation where Iran could be stronger following this than they were previously, controlling the Straits of Hormuz, you know, charging ships to go through there. And now Trump's saying, well, maybe we want in on a little bit of that action. Really? It's like, that's why maybe we didn't go to war. If he wanted to do this, he should have built a coalition with just, you know, an understanding of what is the goal. And right now we've lost that. Well,
we've got the vice president on his way to Pakistan for peace talks, so I think a lot of people will be watching that very closely. Some news closer to home. Laura, the mayor announced his new deputy mayor for community safety. It's going to be Emmanuel Andre, deputy Cook County public defender. This administration's had lots of folks, both within City Hall and at sister agencies, on kind of an interim basis or empty posts. Were you surprised to see Andre's pretty swift appointment?
Well, no, because he promised after he fired Gary and Gatewood, to his predecessor, that he was going to do something quickly, and this is unusual for him to act so quickly and to be that organized. I think, you know, he's had a revolving door, and he's not the first mayor to have a revolving door. Richard M. Daley was infamous for that. I mean, you know, 5 chiefs of staffs in 2 years. But the difference is that people leave quietly, and they don't blast the mayor. They don't when they're going out the door. They don't criticize the mayor, even if they're unhappy. He has created an environment where not only the people are unhappy and willing to talk, but where people feel that they've been, at least they say they've been bullied, they've been disrespected, and they want to shoot back. And and he's dealing with that now.
Yeah, that's a pattern. And that's the issue here, is that you might have, you know, as the mayor, you want to get results. Maybe you don't like the way that someone's running an agency. You can move on. And like you just said, I think Mayor Daley was really good at that. But in this case, it's a pattern where people are coming out talking about his administration bullying them, making them do things they didn't want to do necessarily. And I think that that's a problem. But the question I have for having Laura here, perfect. Does this affect, do voters care about these kind of things? Do they care about personnel issues? Are they going to be like, oh, you know what, I'm not going to vote for this guy because he got rid of the Department of Transportation?
Voters care about results, and they care about getting the job done. And that's the amazing thing about the Gary and Gatewood firing, because the crime is down, people are feeling safer in the city, violence is down, and he decided to shift, you know, less than a year before he's up for re-election, he decided to shift on one of the most important accomplishments in his term. And I think people are watching that.
Yeah, and someone who was very out front
front on a lot of these issues, like Gatewood, not necessarily someone who was, maybe serving as more of a functionary, but
who no one ever heard of.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and Justin, to your point, there was a report this week from Fox 32 about the former Human Relations Commissioner, sent emails on her way out the door saying there were lies, there was a toxic work environment, they were interfering with a report.
Right.
Where, obviously these were emails obtained, rather than her coming out and making a statement. But were you surprised to see her say that?
I mean, the issue is here that it's not a drain the swamp situation. It's not like the mayor just started and he's inherited people and he can't get on the same page. These are all people that the mayor put in. These are all his people. He's 3 years into his administration still having problems with communication. He's not on the same page with his deputies. Everything that goes into that, it shows this pattern that he might not be leading effectively the way that he needs to do to make an efficient government. And the problem with that is that, yes, you're going to have a lot of chaos around that, a lot of confusion. You saw that at DCASE, other places. But at the end of the day, is it the kind of thing that in 6 months his opponents are going to bring up, and as a voter I'm going to be like, yeah, I didn't like what happened at DCASE. I don't know if it matters. That's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, how about that, Hillary? We're looking at less than a year to the mayoral election. Do you imagine these are the sorts of things that Johnson's probably lengthy list of rivals will be using in an effort to unseat him?
Yeah, but it's kind of inside baseball. Yeah. And I think you can't underestimate the value of the grassroots backing him. Turnout was low in the primary, turnout's gonna be low in the mayoral. If you can turn out votes, that's what matters. And Stacey Davis Gates did this interesting interview with Tamon Bradley where she said, we're not trying to win the election, we're trying to win the argument. And I think if you measure how that movement is doing based on the argument rather than maybe the school board elections or whatever,
right.
You could make the case that they are winning the argument on things like taxation, and that makes him a credible threat to win again.
And I think he's positioned himself as, even on the battles that he loses, he's positioned himself as being able to say, I'm a fighter, I'm fighting for you, I'm going to stand up for you no matter what, like the head tax, for example, which is now being, there's consideration in Springfield about eliminating, making sure that he can't pass that. I think that's all about him creating this image that he's there for the progressive movement, he's going to be there, and no one else is going to be there. So that's, I think, would be part of the messaging as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to frame it, that it's sort of about introducing some of these more progressive ideas into city government, not necessarily about just one person. All right, well, you mentioned Springfield. Mike, we heard testimony this week from Anjanette Young. She's pushing for a state ban on no-knock warrants and on officers drawing guns on kids. There was a bill last session in Springfield that didn't go anywhere. Unclear whether it's going to make any moves this year. But if you're Anjanette Young, do you imagine there's just kind of a sense of frustration that this hasn't moved forward so many years after that raid on her home?
Absolutely, and it was high-profile raid. It was just very troubling in what they did. But you got to wonder if there's where's the pushback coming from? Is it from the police officers? Do they feel that this is still a valuable tool? They may have made a mistake in this one case, a high-profile mistake, but overall, it's a tool that they may need in other circumstances. It's been 6 years. Is it going to get passed? It feels like the momentum has already been taken out of there. Something drastic will have to come. She may need to get some more proponents on this. I agree what happened to her was horrible. It should not happen to anybody, but if it's a tool that the police still want to use, it seems like it's still going to be there.
Yeah, they may have some arguments with some more of the moderate or conservative Democrats in Springfield that can win the day there. All right, well, Justin, Chicago School Board came out this week against the idea of Illinois joining this Trump-backed federal school voucher program. But it's interesting, we still haven't gotten a decision from Pritzker, and we've heard from other Democrats like Susana Mendoza saying we should go for it.
Yeah, and this is always going to be the problem, because this is really, the school choice idea is really like sort of spurred by Republicans, and Trump loves it and is pushing it. And so you can never tell if it's actually shot down because of the merits or if it's shot down politically, because it's not going to look good if you're siding with Trump and the MAGA movement. It's not a surprise to me. It's not a surprise in the state of Illinois or the city of Chicago that there would be this sort of, we're not going to accept what the federal government is doing. But the question just remains, on school choice is how are we spending educational dollars when it comes to public schools and giving away vouchers to use that money to go to private schools.
But I think that's one of the fundamental misunderstandings about what something like this would do. Remember, we had something very similar in nature for years in Illinois, that went away and left thousands of kids stranded. And so in Illinois state education funding, we've got this hold harmless policy. So even if we did opt into this federal program, year over year, district funding can't go down from the level it was the year before. So that's one thing I think people misunderstand. These are funded by private donations. And I guess the question at the end of the day is, do we want kids from low-income backgrounds to have the same opportunities as kids from families with money? And I think we should. There are other states, 27 states have adopted this, including Colorado, which also has a Democratic governor.
Yeah. Well, hasn't the governor said, though, that he's concerned because there's the regulations, the actual way this is going to work have not come out yet.
That's true.
And there's questions about where this money will go.
Yeah.
And will it go to the low-income kids, particularly low-income kids who are in public schools? The funding can stay the same and not go down, but many people, including Brandon Johnson, would argue that we need a lot more funding to go into public schools, and that there's a question about whether this will help get us there.
Well, I live in a state that has school choice, Northwest Indiana, and I can tell you, in Northwest Indiana is a traditionally blue Democratic area in a very red state, but people have come to accept school choice and value it, and like having their tax dollars going to help support a private school, especially if in an area that if the public school is not as good. So they like having that choice. I'm not advocating for it, but I do know that there are some Democratic areas that support it.
Yeah, and a lot of parents that love it as well, for sure. Well, sticking with education for a minute, Hillary, CTU is pushing hard to cancel classes on May Day. Trib editorial board weighed in, basically saying that new CPS CEO Macklin King should stay strong. Why do you think it's the wrong move to go in and cancel classes that day?
Because kids should be in school on a school day that's been scheduled for a long time. I think it's totally fair. Teachers who want to protest should protest on their own time. They shouldn't disrupt class to do it. And the other thing that is concerning in this story is some of the curriculum recommendations that have come out that CTU is pushing for teachers to implement in schools. They want 3- and 4-year-old preschoolers to get a history lesson on May Day that probably is more appropriate for a high schooler, probably. But as part of that, they want these 3- and 4-year-olds to have a group activity where they think of something that they think is unfair and then draw a protest sign. It's a little out there. I hope Macklin King can hold strong.
Yeah, but I will play devil's advocate on this because, first of all, they negotiated in the contract to have a civic day of action, the Chicago Teachers Union. It's on the CPS in a certain way where they knew this was coming. So this has been a year, the CTU says for a year's time now, they've been saying to them, we would like that day of civic action to be a day off. CPS, because of all of its changes, Pedro Martinez leaving, Macklin King interim, they just kind of pushed it down the line. So here we are at the end, which it didn't need to be like this. They could have figured it out. So now you've got politics. Now you've got Brandon Johnson involved. Now you've got CTU, you've got CPS, you've got other school factors that are involved. It didn't need to be involved in this. It is a labor holiday, May Day. Right. And it's not surprising that the biggest one of the biggest labor unions in Chicago would want to celebrate that holiday. So what they're determined, and the school board's already voted. They voted to say, listen, you could take the professional development day from June and apply it to May 1st, and there will be no instructional time that is missed. So the idea that kids need to be in the classroom, sure, but I think that that's a little disingenuous from the Tribune to say that because they're not doing that. At a certain point, they're saying, listen, we'll just move our professional development day from June 5th to May 1st. So it's the same amount of time that's in there. Now, whether or not there's a labor lesson plan, that's a great point. I don't know enough about that to comment on it, but I do think that the concept that CPS is just going to go in and say, all right, we're going to teach you about the history of labor, and one size fits all. I just don't know if it's a great idea for either side right now. They should have done this 9 months ago, and I feel like right now, because if you add the extra part, which is the parents, If I'm a parent in the CPS right now, I'd be like, what,
Right.
who, when,
Less
where,
than a
where?
month. We have a sudden day off.
Well, I think that's her point, though.
Yeah.
Let's keep the kids in school, right?
Yeah.
I would push back. I don't think it's disingenuous to say what we said. And I think there's a lot of confusion about what happens now. I've seen that day of action was planned for June, and so in some ways this would be bumping it up. But I think the bigger point is that these kids and these families, they don't need more disruption. I think that's the bigger point here too.
Right.
Yeah.
And the bottom line, doesn't CPS decide, right? I mean,
Yes.
Stacey Davis Gates can say anything she wants, but it's up to the CPS to make the decision.
Right, and they just
go
haven't
for
made
it.
the decision.
Right.
And so that's been
Yeah.
the problem, where they just they waited and waited
Okay.
and waited, and they get to the last minute, and now you're like, yeah, parents and everybody else in between are stuck
There's a lot of
in a
confusion.
rock and a hard place.
Yeah. All right, well, some drama at another sister agency, Laura. The Chicago Housing Authority Board facing a possible lawsuit over violating the Open Meetings Act and the way that they picked a new CEO. But even if that challenge actually materializes, it was a 7-2 vote. So couldn't they potentially just come back
Turn
and do it
around
again?
And do it again. But they're saying that they didn't publicize what they were going to do when they
Right.
made the decision, and that they had a candidate in mind.
Right.
So as far as I can tell, they can do that. And the lawsuit hasn't even been filed yet, so we're not really sure what their arguments are going to be until we see that.
Might just be more of an expression of disappointment.
It's political.
It's free
Imagine
to threaten a lawsuit. Actually doing one takes a little more work.
Yes.
All right, Hillary, Tribb also weighed in this week on Mayor Johnson's agenda in Springfield, and some lawmakers down there trying to negate a few of his signature policies.
Yeah, that's true. We have this weird situation where you've got Democratic lawmakers down in Springfield proposing bills to essentially protect Chicago from its mayor, which is strange. The head tax is what we brought up before. There's a Democratic lawmaker who was also a former mayor who's saying municipalities shouldn't be able to implement this.
Right.
Chicago used to have one, $4 per employee per month. Johnson wants $21 per employee per month. So if business was hurting under $4 situation, $21 would be devastating for our job market. I think that's the problem here, and it's unfortunate Springfield has to expend all of this energy when they have other things to deal with.
And it goes back to what you talked about, Laura, is about winning the argument, right? I mean, that's the thing here is where, at a certain point he might get stopped and moving towards a corporate head tax, but voters remember he tried.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of this is that they're trying to send a message to the mayor as well, and to tell him to back off, because he has not built relationships and been in Springfield, him and his staff, in a way that he should be. So they're saying, we need to have a new day here.
Yeah. All right. Well, a couple big sports items this week before we run out of time. Justin Karnisovis, Eversley gone. The AKME era of the Bulls is over. What finally did him in?
You know what? There had been a couple of things that Ayo Dosunmu who was a hometown kid from Morgan Park who went to the University of Illinois, came to Chicago, played. They traded him to the Minnesota Timberwolves at the trade deadline for nothing, and he is becoming a star and is going to be seen in the playoffs. And you're like, what? And so you did that, and you have the issue with Jaden Ivey. Jaden Ivey was a kid who was picked up by the Detroit Pistons in a trade, who went on social media and did some pretty disruptive live videos, including really criticizing the NBA over their LGBTQ pride nights. And that embarrassed the ownership of the Chicago Bulls. They cut him the next day. And so this was the last straw. Yes, what the last straw is. Not losing, which they've done over and over and over. It was just how their player personnel decisions have been terrible. So it's not surprising. It was going to happen at the end of the year. And so to have it happen before the season end is pretty interesting.
Especially because there's always complaints about the Reinsdorfs and their sense of loyalty that fans get sick of. But it seemed this time, not so much.
But here's the thing. Michael Reinsdorf, who's the owner, it's Jerry Reinsdorf's kid. His kid, and he's in his 70s, I believe. But the issue is that he's taking, who's the consultant is John Paxson. Paxson, former GM, who a lot of fans kind of ran out of town, being like, enough of this. So it's, even though it's a new day and fans might be excited, they're also like head scratching on what the actual decision is going to be.
All right, and the Sky shocked a lot of fans. Trading away the hugely popular Angel Reese to Atlanta. They're getting first-round draft picks in 27 and 28. It feels like it took a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah, Angel Reese wanted out. Yeah. And this is a problem that the Chicago Sky have run into before. They've had a couple other stars who have said, you know what, these facilities aren't up to par. I don't like the management here. I don't like my coach. I don't like the decisions being made. I'm out. So Angel Reese, at the end of last year, she got suspended for half a game for telling, I think it was a Tribune, told the Tribune, like, hey, I wish there was a better roster around me.
Yep.
And they said, all right, you got a half a game. And then she never came back. She just had a back injury. And so it's sad because I think she was a very fan favorite in Chicago.
Right.
We really liked having her here.
Right, we didn't get a chance to see that Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese matchup.
But everybody wanted.
Oh, I was going to be there for sure.
Know. Well,
but didn't happen.
We're going to miss Angel Reese. We've got 4 fan favorites right here, though, but unfortunately we are out of time. So our thanks to Justin Kaufman, Laura Washington, Hillary Gowans, and Michael Puente. We're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
That's our show for this Friday night. For all of us here at the Week in Review, I'm Nick Blumberg. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy, stay safe, and stay informed. Have a great weekend. All right, Mike, city's much-loved cherry blossoms back in bloom, but people should get moving. They're not going to last forever.
Absolutely. There's 230 cherry blossom trees at Jackson Park. They're going to be blooming now. It's going to warm up. They're only going to last another 5, maybe 5 to 10 days. So you better get down there, check them out. They're beautiful, pink, white. You won't be disappointed.
And I know they're sort of a sensitive flower, you know. That's something
That's right.
All this up and down in the temperature, the crazy weather, it can kind of affect them.
Absolutely, but it's rained a lot. We don't like the rain, but they love the rain, the trees. So get down there and enjoy it. With all the craziness in the world, I did a story this week. Yeah. It brought comfort to me.
Do they love the 30 degrees, 70 degrees?
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is a multilingual law firm, providing translators for a variety of languages.